The Caliphate, a form of rule in Islam that lasted for almost 13 centuries, from the death of the Prophet Muhammad to the overthrow of the last Ottoman Caliph in 1924.
The Arabic term for caliph is Khalifa, which actually in essence simply means a successor or a deputy.
The ruler of the Islamic world would call himself Khalifat Rasulillah, the successor of God's messenger.
Through the centuries, the title of Caliph is a term that has been used and at times abused. In June 2014, a militant group calling itself the Islamic State and Iraq and the Levant, or ISIL, declared the establishment of a caliphate. A call rejected by most Muslims around the world. ISIL proclaimed its leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, a caliph, appropriating a title imbued with religious and political significance, and casting a dark shadow over a rich history.
Today's Caliph Baghdadi, he is destroying or attempting to destroy much of the legacy those caliphs had wanted to preserve and to foster.
مفاهيم متخلفة لا تدرس التاريخ ولا تفهم الواقع. حتى الآثار التي طمست يقولون انها أصنام، ما هذه كانت موجودة في زمن الصحابة لما طمسوها.
This is the story of a title that originated 1,400 years ago, that spanned one of the greatest empires the world has ever known. This is the story of the Caliph. Medina, Saudi Arabia. Last resting place of Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam. It was here, in June of the year 632, that he died after a brief illness. The Prophet left behind a young and vibrant Islamic state, uniting most of the tribes of the Arabian Peninsula, with Medina as its capital.
طبعا كان وضع حساس للغاية، لأنه صفات النبي اللي جمع بين السلطة الروحية والسلطة الزمنية صعب جدا انه اي شخص يقدر يجمع بين هالصفتين يعني. بس كان في مصلحة بطبيعة الحال لاستمرار نشر الرسالة اللي كان هو الواجب الأساسي انه يكون في قائد.
Ten years earlier, Muhammad and a group of his early followers, who would come to be known as the Muhajirun, or the emigrants, had fled Mecca and persecution by the pagan leaders of their own tribe, Quraysh. The Prophet and the emigrants were given shelter by the citizens of Medina, who would thereafter be called Al-Ansar, meaning the supporters. Together, these two groups formed the Sahaba, the close companions of the Prophet. His successor would come from one of them.
الأنصار شعروا بأنهم أهل البلد وأهل العدد، ولذلك من حقهم أن يتولوا هذا الأمر بعد الرسول.
In a humble building that used to stand on the site of this public garden, the supporters gathered to decide which of them would be the Prophet's successor. But two of the leading emigrants, Abu Bakr and Omar, interrupted their deliberations.
المهاجرون ردوا أنه نحن الذين تركنا بلادنا وهاجرنا، نحن الأهل الإسلام الأول إلى غير ذلك. كانت المحاججة مبنية على أساس ديني.
After hours of heated debate, the claim of the emigrants was judged to have precedence.
أبو بكر قال: أترضون عمر؟ قال: لا أتقدم عليك، أنت الذي كنت تتولى الصلاة بعد الرسول، أمدد يدك أبايعك. لذلك أسرع وبايعه. هذه السرعة هي التي حلت المشكلة، لأنه بعد أن بايع عمر قدم كبار الأنصار فبايعوا.
In a humble building in Medina, a new age had begun. A new title written into history. A title that would ring down the ages. The first Caliph of Islam, the successor of Muhammad, was to be Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. The following day, Abu Bakr's position was confirmed when the Muslim community gave bay'ah, an oath of allegiance, to the new caliph.
O people, a big task has been assigned to me. Now it is beyond doubt that I've been elected your Emir, although I'm not better than you. Obey me as long as I obey Allah and His Prophet. When I disobey Him and His Prophet, then obey me not.
Abu Bakr was the first of four who would be known as the Rashidun, the rightly guided caliphs.
They were all people who had been very close to the Prophet Muhammad during his lifetime, as his companions, as those who had converted early to Islam and had dedicated themselves to the formation of the early community, the spreading of the message, who had fought in early campaigns and were intimates of the Prophet Muhammad in all ways.
في اليوم الثاني من بيعته للخلافة وضع أقمشته على كتفه وذهب إلى السوق، حتى لقاه في الطريق عمر بن الخطاب وصحابة آخرين قالوا له: إلى أين يا أبي بكر؟ قال: إلى السوق. قال له: البارحة بويعت أمير المسلمين واليوم تذهب إلى السوق. قال: وكيف أطعم عيالي؟ قال: ارجع بنا نعطيك من بيت المال.
Abu Bakr was a profoundly spiritual and modest man. But when some of the Arabian tribes rose up in rebellion, refusing to submit to the new caliphate, he was quick to act.
As a merchant, as someone who knows the whole of Arabia, he knows all the tribal details, the genealogies, the clans, the weaknesses, the strengths, who can be employed against whom, and he transforms himself into this extraordinary, powerful man.
Abu Bakr declared war on the rebel tribes, and after a year of heavy fighting, he emerged victorious. His attention was now turned to the territory of the two superpowers of the era, the Sassanids in Persia and the Byzantines of the Eastern Roman Empire. In an audacious move, taking on both empires at once, he launched the Muslim conquests. But crucially, he gave his men orders to preserve, not destroy.
من يقرأ هذه الوصايا يشعر وكأن أبا بكر رضي الله عنه قد صاغ ميثاق جنيف، فهو يوصي قادته بأن لا يتعرضوا للنساء، لا يتعرضوا لكبار السن، لا يتعرضوا لمتدينين في معابدهم.
Abu Bakr's commander in the east, Khalid, made good ground in Iraq fighting the Sassanids. But the four armies sent to attack Byzantine garrisons in the Levant were meeting heavy resistance. On the Caliph's order, Khalid quickly moved his men across the desert to the western front. In August 634, on the fields of Ajnadin, here in Palestine, the Muslim armies gathered to take on the might of Byzantium in battle.
لما التقى خالد بن الوليد مع الجيوش الأربعة وجد أن الروم قد حشدوا حشدا هائلا، وأن الجيوش الإسلامية كل قيادة تقاتل من غير تنسيق مع الأخرى، فقال لهم كلمة مهمة، قال: إن فرقتكم أنفع لعدوكم من أي مدد، فأعطوني القيادة في اليوم الأول، فحسم المعركة في اليوم الأول.
But in the wake of victory at Ajnadin, and after just 2 years as Caliph, Abu Bakr died at the age of 61.
There's no moment where there's an election or a council and we just have this placement, as it were, like a vice president coming onto the throne of the Caliph when Omar comes there.
Over the next 10 years, Omar, the second rightly guided Caliph, would show himself to be a great strategist and state builder. A few days after he became Caliph, Omar's armies, once more under Khalid, conquered Damascus. But Khalid was soon to be stripped of his command.
ربما الغرور يصيب المنتصر أحيانا، وربما بدت لعمر بعض هذه الظواهر عند خالد فأراد أن يوقفه عند حده، لأن منهج عمر بن الخطاب إنما انتصرنا بالإسلام ولم ننتصر لا بعمر ولا بخالد.
After 2 years, the Caliph would recall this brilliant commander to the battlefront once again. This time here in northern Jordan, in the tranquil valley of the Yarmouk River. In August 636, this was where the Byzantine army clashed with Muslim forces under Khalid. Once more, victory fell to the Muslims.
الروم بعد ذلك بدأوا بالانسحاب، وأدرك هرقل أن هذه الهزيمة بالنسبة له تعني كسر العمود الفقري للروم، فقال: وداعا يا سوريا، وداعا لا لقاء بعده.
The Muslim conquests moved onwards in all directions, capturing the rest of the Levant and its great cities. Finally, they laid siege to Jerusalem itself.
راهب بيت المقدس العجوز سفرونيوس وهو بلا قوة مقاتلة يعرض الصلح، ويشترط أن يأتي عمر بن الخطاب بنفسه لاستلام بيت المقدس.
Jerusalem's significance lay, as it still does today, in its position as a holy place for the three great monotheistic religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Only for Jerusalem was Omar prepared to make his first and last journey as Caliph.
فجاء على ناقة هو ومرافق اسمه أسلم. حينما وصل الركب المدينة كان دور عمر بن الخطاب هو الذي يقود الراحلة وأسلم هو الذي يركب الراحلة، فدخلها مشيا على الأقدام، لم يدخلها على دبابة ولا على صاروخ ولا على طيارة.
Sophronius the Patriarch welcomed Umar, gave him the keys of the city, and then told him to come and pray in the Holy Sepulchre, the holiest church of Christendom. Umar said, "No, I will not pray here." And when the Patriarch asked why not, he says, "Because if I pray here, then after me, Muslims will come and want to pray here, and they'll take this church from you, and I want you to have this church."
Instead, Omar prayed just outside the church. In later years, on the exact spot, this mosque was erected, bearing the Caliph's name. To this day, a copy of the pledge that Omar gave to the Christians of Jerusalem can be seen hanging on the walls of this mosque.
This is an assurance of peace and protection given by the servant of Allah, Umar, commander of the believers, to the people of Jerusalem. He gave them an assurance of protection for their lives, property, church and crosses, as well as the sick and the healthy and all its religious community.
It's a wonderful journey, and so many stories about Omar, about the puritanical commander. But in his journey to Jerusalem, he's at his best. He is sorting out the faith traditions, honouring them in a city that can be shared by all faith communities.
With the Muslims now in full control of the Levant, they moved west and conquered Egypt. In the east, the Caliph's armies triumphed over the Sassanids at Qadisiyah and advanced on their capital, Ctesiphon. At the time, the largest city in the world, all that remains today of Ctesiphon is the Arch of Khusru, once the throne hall of Persian emperors.
You have to remember that the two great superpowers of the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Persia had bestrode the world for the last 400 years. They were the dominant powers. I mean, if you're putting it in a modern parlance, it's a bit like the Eskimos taking on the United States of America and Russia.
In October 644, at the height of his powers, and while leading the Fajr, dawn prayers, Omar was assassinated by a disaffected Persian slave.
يقف عمر بن الخطاب كخليفة كشخصية شامخة في التاريخ الإسلامي. هو حصلت في زمنه أكثر الفتوح في العهد الراشدي، هو الذي استطاع أن يؤسس القواعد الإدارية للدولة. يعني تستطيع أن تقول الدولة الإسلامية في عهد عمر بن الخطاب فيها مؤسسات إدارية، فيها جيش منظم، فيها معسكرات ثابتة، فيها سياسة معينة، فيها قضاء إلى غير ذلك من الأمور التي تكون كل متطلبات الدولة.
The leadership of the Muslims now passed to a man with a markedly different character. Othman became the third of the Rashidun, the rightly guided caliphs. A shrine in Kairouan, Tunisia. Resting place of one of the Sahaba, the Prophet Muhammad's close companions. Abu Zama was killed in the early attempts to conquer the area during the reign of the Caliph, Othman.
الحملة المنظمة الأولى هي حملة عبد الله بن سعد بن أبي سرح اللي هو أخ عثمان من الرضاع. دخلوا العرب وكان الجيش حوالي 20,000 عسكري وانهزمت السلطة البيزنطية.
At first successful, the campaign soon ran into problems over the division of the spoils of war.
الخلافة تأخذ خمس الغنائم. عثمان بن عفان لتشجيع القوات العسكرية يعطيه خمس الخمس، لكن بما أنه قائد الحملة هو أخو عثمان من الرضاعة، كانت من أول بوادر الانشقاقات والحملات السياسية ضد الخليفة عثمان حول اقتسام الغنائم.
The ruling elite of this empire were all derived from Muhammad's tribe, the tribe of Quraysh. These people had become the rulers of a very, very wealthy empire. And they also had large armies that had been drawn from across the peninsula and now were being settled in garrisons in Egypt and Iraq. And so I think the politics and the economics of this situation were almost inevitably going to drive conflict.
In 655, mutinies broke out against the Caliph in Kufa and Basra, and in the garrison at Fustat in Egypt. A year later, armed rebels marched to Medina and took up positions around Othman's house, calling on him to step down.
The blockade of his house turns into a siege, things get ugly, eventually he's broken into and he is assassinated, killed, and it's said that's an awful symbolic moment. He was meditating, reading the Quran in the company of one of his wives, and the blood of the third caliph is spilt on the Quran. So you've got that emblematic moment when the word of God is splattered with blood, and it's as if the Islamic community will never know peace again.
Once again, a caliph had been assassinated. But this time, the killers were Muslims. Less than a quarter of a century after the death of the Prophet, chaos beckoned. The year 656. Just a quarter of a century has passed since the death of the Prophet Muhammad and the foundation of the Caliphate. The third caliph, Uthman, has been murdered by a group of rebels in the capital, Medina.
بعد مقتل عثمان رضي الله عنه كان الذي يسود المدينة هو جو الفوضى. الثوار كانوا يضغطون على علي بن أبي طالب ويقول لهم هذا الأمر ليس لكم وإنما هو لأهل الحل والعقد من المهاجرين والأنصار.
Ali, cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet, yielded to the pressure, becoming the fourth of the Rashidun, the rightly guided caliphs.
He immediately is plunged, far from being a spiritual sort of master, philosopher, poet, theologian, he's plunged into having to cope with a very, very murky political waters.
Kufa, Iraq, bedrock of support for the new caliph, Ali. Abandoning Medina, he moved his capital here in the face of a growing threat coming from close to the Prophet himself. Calling for the punishment of Uthman's killers, Aisha, one of the Prophet's wives, and two of his closest companions, Talha and Zubair, gathered an army to do battle with the new caliph. It came to be known as the Battle of the Camel.
This set the scene for violent conflict between Muhammad's former companions. Ali was victorious and Talha and Zubair were defeated. Aisha withdrew from public life after this defeat.
The Islamic State had fallen into its first civil war. The first, but not the last. Damascus, the Syrian capital. In 634, and after almost 7 centuries under Roman rule, this city was conquered by Muslims. Muawiyah, an army commander, was appointed governor of Damascus, and later the entire province.
معاوية بن أبي سفيان مكث في الشام واليا بحدود 20 سنة فاستطاع أن يصطنع الناس ويعاملهم بطريقة سياسية. هو لم يضيق عليهم وسمح لهم بالعيش كما يراؤون. لذلك الشاميون شعروا بأن معاوية هو الأصلح إليهم.
Muawiyah came from the same family of the Quraysh tribe, the Umayyads, as the murdered caliph Uthman. He refused to give the oath of allegiance to the new caliph, Ali.
Many of Uthman's relatives began to demand that Ali hand over those killers for justice. And the center of Umayyad resistance to Ali was Syria, which was governed by a member of Uthman's family, his second cousin, a man called Muawiyah.
In 657, Ali marched northwards to quell Muawiyah's mutiny.
They met at a battle called the Battle of Siffin, which was inconclusive, and they agreed to negotiate. This proved to be a canny decision on the part of Muawiyah because it split Ali's support. Some of his supporters felt that he shouldn't be negotiating. As the caliph, he should just fight until he'd established his power.
In January of 661, the dissidents in Ali's army decided to try to wrest power from the elite. They planned to assassinate Ali, Muawiyah, and his ally Amr, the governor of Egypt. But their conspiracy ended with only one victim, Ali, the Caliph. After 3 decades, the first chapter, the era of the Rashidun, the rightly guided, was over.
كان الصراع بين رجل خليفة وقره الدين والتقشف والرؤية العلمية الدينية، وبين الشخص الداهية السياسي معاوية بن أبي سفيان. ونرى بأن السياسة هنا تغلبت على البساطة والتقشف والورع الديني.
Muawiyah emerged triumphant, establishing the Umayyad Caliphate. A new dynasty, no longer primarily religious. The Caliphate now began to look more like a monarchy. The ruins of Anjar in eastern Lebanon. Once thought to be Byzantine Roman, the city was in fact built by the Umayyads. They had adopted the architectural style of the Byzantines, along with their structures of imperial rule.
كان عندهم نماذج سلطة سياسية بجوارهم، وهن كانوا على اطلاع سواء بنظام الحكم البيزنطي والإمبراطورية الفارسية، فأخذوا من النظامين حتى يبنوا نظام الخلافة. بس نظام الخلافة ما عنده قواعد إذا بدك بالقرآن الكريم نفسه، هو شغل الإنسان يعني.
Under Muawiyah, the Caliphate changed its form. And as a king would have done, he named his son Yazid as his successor.
The early caliphate was not dynastic. People were chosen by being designated by their predecessor or by groups who consulted amongst themselves. So it was, if you like, elective in the loosest possible sense of the word. And that's how the first 4 caliphs were chosen, by, if you like, the consensus of the early Muslim community.
Yazid became caliph on his father's death in 680. His rule was to plunge the state into another civil war. In Medina, the first capital, powerful figures in the Muslim community were beginning to build strong opposition to Yazid.
Particularly important examples are Abdullah, the son of Zubayr, who had challenged Ali in the first civil war. Also Hussein, the son of Ali, who had been caliph during the first civil war. He also resisted the call for a pledge of allegiance to Yazid.
To signal his rejection of Yazid's caliphate, Hussein left Medina for Mecca. From there, he set off for Kufa, former stronghold of his father. But in October 680, here in Karbala, Iraq, Yazid's forces trapped and killed Hussein and most of the members of his family. Nonetheless, opposition to Umayyad rule was far from over.
Abdullah ibn Zubayr refused to pledge allegiance to Yazid. He described himself as the one who seeks sanctuary in God's house, and went to Mecca, sought refuge there. Yazid decided to send an army against Abdullah ibn Zubayr. But Abdullah ibn Zubayr was saved by the premature death of Yazid. At that moment in 683, he proclaimed himself caliph.
Meanwhile, in Damascus, Muawiyah II son of Yazid, was installed as the third caliph of the Umayyad dynasty. But within a few weeks, he died leaving no son, no successor. A power vacuum seized on by the rival caliph in Mecca.
قوية المعارضة التي شكلها عبد الله بن الزبير، فاحتشدت حوله بعض القبائل العربية، قبائل من العراق وقبائل من سوريا وقبائل من فلسطين.
Amman, the Jordanian capital. A city overlooked by the remains of a Byzantine castle and the palace of the Umayyad governor. The tribes of Jordan were the last to stay loyal to the Umayyads. In 684, a tribal gathering held here chose Marwan as the new Umayyad Caliph. And it was his son, Abd al-Malik, who would reunite the Islamic State under the firm rule of the Umayyads. The Dome of the Rock, Jerusalem's most recognizable landmark. Built on the orders of the Umayyad Caliph, Abd al-Malik, this is the third holiest site in Islam. But at that time, the two most holy sites, the mosques of Mecca and Medina, lay in the hands of the Umayyads' rival caliph, Ibn Zubayr. In 691, Al-Hajjaj, a ruthless Umayyad general, set off for Islam's holiest place with a powerful army.
Abd al-Malik sent him to besiege Mecca and defeat Ibn Zubayr, perhaps because Abd al-Malik himself didn't want to be too closely associated with the damage to the shrine.
Al-Hajjaj put Mecca under siege, and a desperate Ibn Zubayr took shelter in Islam's most sacred shrine, the Kaaba. But Al-Hajjaj was not to be deterred and bombarded it with a catapult. After 8 months of determined resistance, Ibn Zubayr was killed in last-ditch fighting.
واستطاع عبد الملك بن مروان أن يعيد توحيد الدولة الإسلامية مرة جديدة وأن يعيد سياستها بشكل رائع ويقوم بحركة الفتوحات ومنجزات كثيرة تحسب لعبد الملك بن مروان في سياق بناء الدولة العربية الإسلامية.
After 2 decades as caliph, Abd al-Malik bequeathed a legacy of stability to his son, Al-Walid. On that foundation, Al-Walid would build a still greater empire. Rabat, the capital of modern Morocco. It was here in 708 that the armies of the Umayyad Caliph Al-Walid reached the Atlantic coast. After more than 50 years of fierce resistance by local Berber tribes, the Muslims had finally conquered the whole of North Africa.
يعني حوالي نصف قرن من الكر والفر، من انتصارات وانهزامات، من استقرار ورجوع إلى الشرق، وهذا شيء مخالف لما وقع بالشرق.
Having been conquered, the Berbers discovered that Islam had much to offer and began to convert and assimilate. One of them Tariq ibn Ziyad was about to write his name in history. Jabal Tariq, the mountain of Tariq. Gibraltar, southern tip of the Iberian Peninsula. It was here in the spring of 711 that Tariq's army of Berbers landed after crossing the Mediterranean. Inside 3 years, he had toppled the Visigoth rulers and secured almost total control of the peninsula, turning it into a caliphal province known as Andalusia.
فهو بربري ولكنه مسلم قبل كل شيء، يعني دخل في الدين الجديد وصار من أبطال الدين الجديد، من أبطال الإسلام.
Along with the great conquests in Europe, there was more success in Asia. Muslim armies began advancing towards what is today Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the Central Asian republics. Within 10 years, they had reached the borders of China. The Umayyads had built the biggest empire yet known.
هذه العزيمة أنتجت إمبراطورية كما أنتج الرومان إمبراطورية بنفس الطريقة، كما أنتج اليونان قبلهم بنفس الطريقة، كما أنتج الفرس قبلهم بنفس الطريقة. التصميم والعزم والإرادة هي التي تصنع الإمبراطوريات.
Unlike the traditions of early Islam, the walls of Qusayr Amra in the Jordanian desert are painted in a Byzantine style. Here, Al-Walid is depicted not as a religious figure, but as an emperor. In just 10 years, he had made himself the most powerful man on earth. But his successors would struggle to retain that power. The Pyrenees, the daunting natural barrier between Spain and France. In 732, under the command of Abd al-Rahman al-Ghafiqi, the governor of Andalusia, Muslim forces crossed these mountains into French territory. Seemingly unstoppable, they advanced north, capturing one city after another.
جرأة عبد الرحمن الغافقي هي التي جعلته يتجه في اتجاه أبواتي رغبة منه بأنه قد، وأقول هنا قد، يقوم بفتح فرنسا أو بلاد غالا آنذاك، إلا أنه لم يكن على دراية بطبيعة الخصم، وهنا نتحدث عن شر المطرقة كما يسميه العرب، ولم يكن كذلك على دراية بأن كان هناك نوع من الوحدة حول هذا الرجل.
On this field, to the north of the French city of Poitiers, the advancing troops were stopped by a Frankish army under Charles Martel. The Muslims were defeated and their commander, Abd al-Rahman, killed. Muslims remember this battle as the Martyrs' Yard, but European history knows it as the Battle of Tours, a victory that stopped the northern spread of Islam and saved Christian Europe.
It then came to symbolize for later historians, in particular for the great English historian Edward Gibbon. He saw it as a decisive turning point in the battle between Europe and the Muslim world. And he famously said that if it hadn't been for Charles Martel and Tours, we would now be preaching the Quran in Oxford.
This defeat in Europe in the reign of the 10th Umayyad Caliph, Hisham, brought an end to Umayyad invincibility. And just as his palace in Jericho, Palestine, lies in ruins today, Hisham's death in 743 threw the whole state into chaos. After almost 2 years of Umayyad family infighting over the caliphate, Marwan II emerged as the 14th and last Umayyad Caliph.
ثم جاء في الأخير مروان بن محمد كان قد يعني اتسع الفتق ولا يستطيع أن يرقيه.
Absorbed by his efforts to contain trouble at the heart of the state, the new caliph was oblivious to grave events unfolding in the east.
A rather mysterious leader who's remembered by the name Abu Muslim was calling for pledges of allegiance to the Prophet's family, and he managed to draw a substantial following from eastern Iran into an army to oppose Umayyad rule.
The rebel army marched westward and captured Kufa in Iraq. In November 749, here in the city's mosque, Bay'ah, the oath of allegiance, was given to the first Abbasid caliph.
They proclaimed a man as caliph called Abu al-Abbas as-Safah, and he was a descendant of one of the Prophet Muhammad's uncles, and he based his claim to the caliphate on that kinship with the Prophet Muhammad.
In January 750, on the banks of the Zeb River in Iraq, the Umayyads, led by their caliph Marwan, fought their last battle against the Abbasid army. After a heavy defeat, Marwan escaped westwards. That summer of the year 750, he was killed by the Abbasids. After 90 years in power, the Umayyad Caliphate had been brought to an end.
Why the Umayyads lost power and what exactly happened in the Abbasid revolution is a difficult question, but it seems to be related to this ongoing sense that the Prophet's family had a right to rule the caliphate. And this was a problem that the Umayyads never really successfully contained.
Some Muslims believe that the caliphate should always have remained strictly within the Prophet's bloodline. This belief would lead to the biggest split in the history of Islam. A split which is still exploited to this day. The centuries-old divide between Sunni and Shia.